Welcome everyone to the Medicare Team podcast. It's me, Joshua, joining you again after a long leave. And also joining me here is Thomas Fulmer. So we got an absolute amazing episode today. I think y'all are really gonna enjoy it.
Definitely.
So we're gonna be talking about today what's not covered under Medicare. A lot of people think that these things may be covered, but we just need to address them so that way that y'all can plan effectively for the areas that aren't covered that you might think that Medicare should cover. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we can jump right into it with, kind of discussing what the differences are between, long-term care and the skilled nursing facilities.
yeah, and just to let y'all know, for the skilled nursing care, that is something that is received after a hospital stay. It's kind of meant to bring you back into recovering. It's not like a permanent condition like long-term care helps treat. Typically, it's after a hospital stay. And actually, original Medicare requires that you be in the hospital for 3 days. So if you're on like a supplement plan, before you can receive care through a skilled nursing facility. I actually have a story on that if
Yeah.
you would wanna.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I know.
For
I'm
sure.
always, open to hear a story.
Yeah, well, it's a little personal. It's with my family. My grandfather, he had a urinary tract infection,
Mm.
so he went to the hospital, and he was in there for 2 days, and the doctor wouldn't let him out. But because it didn't hit that 3-day mark yet, where it wouldn't be covered by Medicare,
Yep.
we had to basically like beg the doctor to keep him in for one more day, so that way Medicare could actually cover the skilled nursing
Yeah.
side of things. But generally, skilled nursing is something that happens after a hospital stay, and it's meant to bring you back to recovery where you're able to be on your own again.
Right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically like a rehabilitation
Yeah.
service. And, I appreciate you sharing that story. That's, obviously I'm sorry to hear that, but it's unfortunate the way that things are now. But, you have to fight to have them keep your grandfather in the hospital for one more day just so that he can get,
Yeah.
efficient coverage through his insurance through Medicare.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, I mean, getting back right into that, with skilled nursing facilities, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a 20-day lifetime total stay for skilled nursing facilities covered through Medicare. And then from days 20 through 100, you are covered under copays each day. And then
Yeah.
after day 100, you are taking on 100% of the expenses yourself.
Yeah, and that's lifetime, so that's for the extent of your entire life. It's not like a hospital stay where that would reset. So you have a lifetime number of days that you'll be skilled for skilled nursing. But a lot of people would think that long-term care might be covered by Medicare. And long-term care is the daily care and support for someone who the definition is chronically ill, but like someone who can't perform two of the daily
Activities of daily
activities
living?
of
Yeah.
living, yeah, like eating, bathing, or like a couple of them, like that can't take care of themselves without a
No,
caregiver.
right.
And a lot of people think that's covered by Medicare, but it's just not.
It's not.
It's not covered.
Yeah.
So you're going to be responsible for all of the max out of pocket. Why I'm saying max out of pocket, I'm so used to Medicare term. You're going to be responsible for all the costs of that unless you
Yeah.
get a separate insurance plan.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I wanted to go into long-term care a little bit here, just kind of explain how that all works.
Of course.
So there's different types of long-term care. You can get care at your home, or like a person comes to your house and helps you with your care. Most long-term care is actually done by a family member. And I'm
Mm.
sure many people who are listening to podcasts, me, all
Right.
have experience with that,
Mhm.
where you have someone, either a parent or someone that who can't go work, can't really have a life because they're at home all the time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
don't mean to
they
cut you off, but I mean, this now goes farther into affecting other people's lives
yeah,
now, rather than just, the unfortunately afflicted one who, needs the long-term care. And now the responsibility for them falls onto either, a child
yeah,
or a family friend or a brother or a sister now has to stay with them perpetually because they can't bathe themselves, they can't eat by
yeah,
themselves, they can't pretty much do anything. And this all could have been avoided or
yeah,
whatever because you have a long-term care plan in place.
yeah. Or short-term care even is
Yeah,
going to be helpful.
right.
So, I just want to read some stats here on my phone. So, according to the American Association for Long-Term Care Insurance, 54 or 51% of women, 65 and over will need a paid long-term care
Wow.
stay. And 39% of men 65 plus will need that long-term care stay
Wow.
of some sort. So just because statistically women live longer than men, they're typically in long-term care facilities for longer.
Right.
I mean, it'll be quite obvious if you've ever been and visited a
Mhm.
long-term care facility that that's true.
Right.
Um, my grandfather is in one right now.
Mhm.
So going and visiting him, it's a Medicaid facility. So the government's paying for it. So I want to go a little bit into what will happen if you just leave it. Let it go. I'm not gonna self-insure. I don't have anything. The government doesn't have any. I,
Any help,
I want
right.
the government to cover it.
Yeah.
So the only way you can get long-term care coverage is through a state assistance through Medicaid. So Medicaid is kind of like that coverage that takes care of the rest of your medical coverage and your long-term care coverage, and it can help with other stuff as well. But it's only for very low income individuals. And the only way that you're going to be able to qualify for Medicaid is you got to spend all your assets down.
The spend down program, yep.
Yeah, so you're going to basically have to spend everything you have. They have, I think, a 60. You guys can look it online, but they have I believe, a 60-month look back. But they look back, and it's not like you can just transfer those assets to your family or anything like that. Like
Right,
they're
you
gonna
have
look
to.
back if they see you've done that. They're gonna seize them and use
Mhm.
them to help cover your long-term care
Yeah.
costs. So if you after you spend down the assets, you really aren't gonna have much left.
Right, of course.
But after you die, they actually have the right to come and try to recoup some of the costs in your estate as
Wow.
well for your long-term care costs. So having a very extended long-term care stay, if you want to leave an inheritance to either a charity or your family, it's very important that you get coverage to help avoid that, as that is actually not too rare of a situation where
Yeah.
people have a very extended long-term care stay. And I believe like if you want yeah, I'll need to look up the stats here, but it's very expensive,
Yeah, well,
for
and
long-term care.
right. I mean, and then the unfortunate truth is too, is that most people do think that Medicare, covers their long-term care stays,
Yeah,
which is just not the truth, unfortunately. People say, "Oh, I paid into Medicare my entire life. It's everything's covered," and that's not
yeah,
true. Long-term care is a huge, huge example of that. So,
yeah. So I just did a quick Google search
mhm.
here. Um, so nursing home, if you want like a semi-private room at a nursing home, it's gonna be around 110 to 110 to $112,000 a year.
Wow.
Assisted living facility, which is less intensive of care,
Hmm.
is gonna be around 66 to $70,000 per year. And sorry, there's a beep there. And if you want someone to come in to your house and take care of you, like a paid person to come in, it's going to be around 50 to $70,000 a year. And that's for someone to come into your house, so
Yeah.
in-home coverage.
Wow.
So there's different levels of protection you can do for that,
Hmm.
so that your family at least has a break
Yeah.
from taking care of you. Um, and also protection for your assets. If you ever do need to, worst case scenario, you have a very extended long-term care stay and you have some substantial assets and you want to leave an inheritance, there is a way that you're able to do that. The government did make a way where you're able to help protect some of those assets while still being able to qualify for Medicaid and protection from them coming and grabbing those assets after you pass away.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you wanted to get into kind of how the long-term care, like when you do have these plans in place, how it pays out, how it works, God forbid you do have to use
Yeah.
it.
So long-term care, short-term care, they typically will work in the same way. Typically, if you aren't able to perform two of the daily
Activities of daily living.
activities of daily living, I don't know why that's not coming to my mind. Or if you have like Alzheimer's or dementia,
Hmm.
is the other way that these benefits would activate. So there's two types of care. There's short-term care and there's also long-term care. Short-term care typically will gives you like a daily benefit amount to be able to help. It depends on the plan, but typically it's to help with bring someone in to help take care of someone. You can do formal, informal caregivers. A lot of times require that you do it with a licensed person,
Right.
and we can help you out with all that if you
Mhm.
work with us on, like, where you're able to get that. But also, they can also help cover skilled nursing. Like I said, it all depends on the plan.
Of course,
So
yeah.
that's why you work with a licensed agent or broker who's been trained who can help you with that, and we're able to help you with that here at the Medicare team if you decide to work with us. Then long-term care. So I'm going over to long-term care. Long-term care typically has a longer benefit period, more comparable coverage, and there's different types of long-term care plans. But the one I really want to focus on now for asset protection is there are long-term care plans that work with the state, and they have to have meet certain qualifications,
Mhm.
but would be able to help you with that. But they can help protect your assets. So each state's a little different on how it works, but in order to qualify for Medicaid, basically your income's either going to have to be very low or paid to the state, basically to be able to receive the coverage.
Mhm.
And you have to spend your assets down to a couple $1,000s. It depends on the state.
Right.
Let's say if you get a long-term care plan, that's one that works with the state that you're in. And let's say the state, let's just say that you get a $500,000 long-term care plan. If you get that plan, you're now protected, your assets are. You get an extra $500,000 worth of assets you can keep before you qualify for Medicaid for long-term care coverage. And the state does that because they want to incentivize people to go out and get coverage, so that way the government's not having to pay as much of the
Right.
bill, and that's why they do that. But the benefits of having long-term care is you're able to have a lot more choices when it comes to where you want to stay at. You don't have to go to a government facility that is run. And from my experience with my grandfather, there's some people in there
Yep.
that are great caretakers, and there's some people in there that could care less.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, a lot of times when I go in there, the ground is sticky, and
Yeah.
you're in a room with another person. It's very sad.
Yeah.
Going through a facility like that,
Mhm.
because I mean it shows the how fragile we are as humans
Of
too.
course.
Like these guys were all young one time, and what age can do to you. So it's always good to be prepared for situations like this. God forbid
Mhm.
you would ever need to go through a long-term care stay. It's not like something that might be a little more rare, like cancer or other types of things. Like a lot of people, you have a very high percentage of having to at some point in your life go into a long-term care facility. And y'all who are watching, you can think about your relatives, people you known who've been through long-term care, because I believe every person listening to this will have some type of
Yeah,
experience in their life where they
definitely.
had someone they knew, some family member who had to go through that.
Yeah,
So
it's just that common, I
it's
mean,
very
the
common.
stats you brought up over, more than half a lot more than half of women are
Yeah.
going to be needing it in their lifetime,
Yeah.
so
And that's paid long-term care. So that's not even the
right.
informal
Mhm.
or informal long-term care you get from your family
Right,
members.
of course not, yeah.
So, you can get, for those who might not have a lot of assets, you might be more interested in a short-term care plan. That can help cover your initial stages, of not being able to be on your own, anymore. Give you just a daily benefit for either a skilled nursing facility or someone to come in the house, maybe during the workday, so your kids can still go out and work. They can still have a life during the workday because you're able to provide that, have that money to pay someone to come in and just look after you if you would ever need that to happen. And if you have pretty substantial assets and you want to help protect those, then a long-term care plan would probably be a little bit more suitable for your needs. Or if you just like, I don't want to rely on the government, obviously you're going to need more coverage to guarantee that.
Of course, yeah.
So obviously we can't guarantee anything.
Mhm.
That in this life there are plans that do like have guaranteed coverage for the rest of your life, but those plans are going to be a lot more expensive, obviously. So
Mhm.
the higher level of coverage you get, obviously, the more expensive it's going to be. But your short-term care is going to give you help at the beginning and of your journey if you ever needed to go there. Long-term cares can help protect your assets. It can really help you out.
Yeah, and I wanted to
Yeah.
touch on basically a real life scenario when it comes to that, right? If somebody does get admitted to a long-term care facility
Yeah.
and they don't have the money to pay, right? They're going to start coming after your assets. Is that correct? They're going to come
Yeah.
after, if you have a house or you have land or you
Yeah.
have,
There's
expensive.
some stuff, there are some exceptions to it. Like They give like a certain amount of equity you can have in your house. And there are some exceptions. Sometimes people will like you can get a burial plot and stuff like that
Right.
all set up because that's exempt from the asset limit. But yeah, they're gonna come after any assets that you might have, like stocks, if you have anything like
Yeah.
that, any savings, anything beyond what's disqualified. You can look it up
Right.
online if you want to know exact list of everything. But yeah, they're gonna be coming after it. And also another thing you don't think about is once you're with these, once you do get into facility, it's not like you keep your social security check. Your social security check goes towards your long-term care, and they give you a very small allowance basically to use for non-long-term care needs.
Right. Of
So
course. Yeah.
it's not fun, and there is some spousal protection rights that the
Mhm.
government put in there because a lot of times spouses might, like a husband might go into long-term care first, and then now they spend down all the assets of the couple, and then now the wife is left pretty much on Medicaid.
Yeah.
There is some protection there, but there is still spend down to some point as a couple. But there is the government did put in some protections there.
Yeah.
But like I said, work with someone, a licensed agent who knows, who's been trained in all this to help
Mhm.
you guide you through your journey, because this is something you really don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
Long-term care, because you want to leave an inheritance to your children. I know I do.
Of
I'm
course.
gonna want to leave stuff to my family, or if you don't have a if you don't want to leave stuff to your kids because they're entitled brat, you can at least donate your assets to charities
Right.
that you support and love.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um
Well, I mean, I'm glad we touched on that because I know that was like the biggest topic that we wanted to talk about today because it's so
mhm.
important, long-term care is. But I mean, getting into some other things that Medicare
Yeah.
doesn't cover, we can move right into, I mean, stuff like cosmetic surgeries. I know that any experimental medical services,
Yeah.
they're not covered.
Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So starting with cosmetic surgery stuff, I know implants are not covered. That's, I think, the main one that I go talk to people and they need on a day-to-day basis. That's a very, very big one that is not
Yeah,
covered under Medicare.
yeah,
I think,
dental's not, unless it's like Advantage plans have limited dental.
right,
And
exactly.
you said what? You only saw one plan and like all this
Yeah,
time doing this that had some level of implant. Like
yeah,
implants are not going to be covered on like almost anybody's. Like
yeah.
there's
You'll
like
be
very rare.
hard pressed to find
Yeah.
an Advantage plan that covers implants. I mean, it's even hard to find ones that of course, aside from Medicaid, that cover dentures,
Mm.
that cover at least completely. There are dental, limited dental options with the Advantage plans, but
Yeah.
um,
But if you have a supplement, there's like no
there's
coverage.
nothing. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you don't get
towards
any
that.
dental
Or
coverage.
you're just on original Medicare.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A and B, you don't get anything. Supplement, you don't get any vision or hearing either. With the experimental products, I know that if it's something that the government basically hasn't approved as, medically necessary.
If it's still experimental, so they're in their
Right.
initial stages. So, let's say there's a scenario where you might have, let's say you got cancer, and there's this experimental treatment for that type of cancer you really want to try. Medicare's not going to cover that. Your supplement plan's
Yeah.
not going to cover that because it hasn't been tested, hasn't been proved, and hasn't been accepted by the government yet.
Exactly.
So that's why we recommend that those who get that, or that you consider getting sorry, not long-term care, that you consider getting a cancer plan and a heart
Mhm.
attack and stroke plan, because a lot of those costs are not going to be non-medical. So it's like
Right.
you traveling to the facility, you getting a hotel, you want your spouse to come with you, you're gonna have to pay for her and her food and her travels as well. There's a lot of costs that are non-medical that your supplement plan is just not going to cover, which is why it's good to have just a lump sum of cash if something like that, God forbid, were ever to happen.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's a lot of people don't even think about that,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and I don't blame them. It's something that goes under a lot of people's radars when they think of somebody getting cancer. They think of, oh, the treatment is going to be so expensive, the chemo. They don't think of if the hotel
Yeah.
is miles away and you have to drive up there every day. You have to, for some reason, you have to be unemployed as a spouse to go visit your partner.
Yeah.
They don't think about these other costs that
As
could
well.
be
Yeah.
right, saved with a, God forbid, whatever, but you need a cancer, heart attack, and stroke plan, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, would cover these things.
And then how does like most cancer coverage on Advantage plans?
Yeah, cancer coverage on Advantage plans for chemotherapy drugs. I know you're still liable for 20% of the cost.
Yeah, and that's a
Um,
lot.
which is a lot. Yeah,
which
the
is
drugs are,
yeah.
yeah, a huge thing when it comes to that. And I know chemotherapy, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 20% as well,
Yeah,
or
it should be on most advantage
on
plans.
most. Yeah, typically.
It should be around 20%.
Right.
And that means you're going to be hitting your if you're on
Maximum
Advantage
out of
plan,
pocket
your maximum out of pocket
almost
pretty
every
much
year.
for every year that you're getting coverage. So let's
Yep.
say maybe you're in October, November, towards the end of the year, you just get it. Now you're going into treatment. You're going to hit that max out of pocket, which could be like $9,000,
Yep.
depending upon the plan you got. Um, and you hit that, and then that resets in January.
And now
And
you
then
have another
you have
9,000.
another, so you should get some level of coverage, at least $25,000 worth of coverage there to help cover those costs, if
Yep.
not more, for your non-medical costs as
Of
well.
course. Yeah.
Especially if you're on Advantage plan,
Yeah.
because that's on Advantage plans. There's the two holes. One is with your hospital costs.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a hospital stay, those tend to be quite expensive. And another hole typically is your cancer. So those two are the most expensive holes in your Medicare Advantage plans. So
And, two things that can, supplement those costs or help out with those costs would be the cancer, heart, and stroke packages as well as hospital indemnity packages.
Yeah.
And basically, what they do is they pay you a lump sum. God forbid you would have any of those things happen to you. So if you got cancer or you had a heart attack or you had a stroke, whatever you set the benefit amount to, you will just get paid. And then you can use that to either cover the costs of, what happened to
or you
you,
could use it
or
to go to Disney World.
you could
They
use
don't
it
really
for,
care what
they don't
they
care what you use it for. You could use it for whatever you need. So,
Yeah.
and they are, as we've seen, a lot more affordable than people think.
Yeah, they
You're not
are.
going, you're probably not going to be looking at $600 a month for, these
Yeah.
plans. So there's, they are very affordable. And I would say, I have a lot of conviction in these plans. I know a lot
Yeah.
of us in the office actually have gotten
Yeah.
them for
I
ourselves.
got a cancer, heart attack, stroke, and critical illness plan for $75,000 myself.
Yep.
Because I believe like what's the point? It's like especially at my age, like it's not like
Yeah,
that premium's like 30 so dollars a month. Like
exactly.
it's nothing.
Exactly.
And obviously the older you get, the more the premium is going to be, which is
Yeah.
why you also want to lock your rate in,
Mhm.
because whenever you get with a lot of these carriers, they charge you by the issue age, meaning that like your charges and premium are going to be based off of the age that you got the plan at.
Right. So if I got it now at 25
Mhm.
and my premium would be $25 a month
Yeah.
for my cancer, heart attack, and stroke plan, I could pay that $25 and then still pay $25 when I'm 65. Versus if you
Yeah.
get it at 65, you're going to be looking at a little bit more expensive. But, getting it to 65, that's still a good age to get it because you don't really want it when you're 90 years old, 85 years old,
Yeah,
when
as
you're
you get
real
older,
likely to have those.
it gets a
Right.
lot more expensive. And you're charged at the issue age. So there's a slight chance that they might change the premium on that issue age a
Mhm.
little bit, but they have to raise it on everyone that was issued at that age, if that makes sense. But typically, it's going to remain the same unless they're losing money, which
Definitely.
they're not losing money
Right.
typically.
Yeah.
So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
But I mean, there are some other things, smaller things than what we just talked about than long-term care. But cosmetic surgeries are not covered. Facelifts, anything that you want to do to, look more aesthetically pleasing, are not going to be covered. Right. Plastic surgery is probably not going to be covered.
So like it's not medically necessary. So
Right, exactly. And
yeah.
then also, this is big for people who travel a lot. Any coverage outside of the US, there are very, very few exceptions for routine coverage and even emergency care outside of the US.
Yeah. So if you are going to, let's say, Europe on your extravagant retirement trip with all your high school buddies, I don't know what you do, but if you're going outside the US, except in very limited circumstances, some Medicare Advantage plans cover like emergency stuff, but majority of the time you're not going to have any coverage outside the US,
Yep.
which means it's going to be responsible on you.
Yep.
There are, if you're interested, there are some plans that help.
Foreign travel plans for sure.
Yeah, that help with that if you ever are planning on going outside the US, especially if it's going to be for extended amount of time.
Mhm.
But just to make you all aware that that is not going to be covered by Medicare.
Yep.
It's just good to know all this stuff.
It is.
So that in case in case it were to happen, you're aware you can plan for it.
Yep.
So
And it's, like I said earlier, people go into Medicare when they turn 65 and they think that they're completely covered. And, even with if you have just A and B, they think that they're completely covered. And even then, they still have, a 20% out of pocket cost that they have to,
mhm.
or, percentage that they have to meet for any of their covered services. So it's
Yeah,
just today we really wanted to kind of group all of the things that Medicare doesn't cover together
yeah,
so you guys would be aware and can avoid these costly mistakes in the future when you guys are aging
yeah,
in, or even if you're on Medicare now and you didn't know this. So
yeah. And then one other point, I know that we said we're gonna skip past this one at the beginning when we're talking to each other, but I wanted to go into it. Like non-medically necessary services.
yeah,
I mean, which kind of groups into some of the other things. But the reason why I would bring it up is if your doctor, physician says, "Hey, you don't need that,"
right,
you're not gonna get it covered
yep,
at all.
hmm,
So if you have something you really want to do, even if a doctor doesn't say so,
it won't be covered.
it won't be covered.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I
exactly.
did wanna just bring that up here, but is there anything else you wanna go into today? I
I
think
think I'm good. I think we
that's
touched on a
about it.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, if y'all have any, questions online, anything at all, please leave it in the comments, and we'd love to hit on it within the next episodes. We thank you so much for watching this episode of the Medicare Team podcast. We hope that you learned something. If you ever want to speak with us here, at the Medicare Team, you can, usually there's a link in the bio or some information in the description to get in contact with one of us. As a licensed agent, we'd love to serve you. We'd love to work with you for the rest of your life here. We thank you for watching this episode, and y'all have a great rest of your day.